February 28th on the raid?
Well, I was a special agent with the Treasury Department for 26 years. I wasn't an ATF agent, but being a sister Treasury agent, I was asked by ATF to take a look at certain things during the course of the investigation. They didn't really need my help, but I was really more of a specialist in money laundering and other types of investigative techniques, and they wanted me to check some things out there. So I was involved to a small part in the investigation, and I'd been in the undercover house before the search warrant. And then obviously they asked me then, once they determined they were going to conduct a search warrant, if I would assist with that. So I told them, of course, yes, I would. I was part of an arrest support team standing by when the initial ATF team went in. And of course, they immediately got shot up and pinned down. So I was never dispatched to go in. But I stayed on the line, went out right after the shootout, and I stayed on the line for the next several days after the shootout.
Okay. So what piqued your interest in doing a book 30 years later?
Well, it's been 30 years. And first of all, I'm retired. I have time to do it. And you get old and start reflecting back. I originally started writing this as just a memoir, just a personal memoir, and mainly maybe to leave for my grandkids. And I thought, well, they won't know anything about this. So I started adding history, and I did some historical research and did some things. And I finally decided, you know what, I'm going to write a book because there is so much disinformation out there about what happened. And I wanted to tell the people, and I think I have in Ranch Apocalypse. I've told them not just what happened, but even how it came about, the deliberations and the things that were going through their minds, why they decided to do a dynamic entry versus a siege, why the FBI decided to insert CS gas, and the reasoning behind it, and let people know really what happened and know the truth.
All right. So you tracked down a lot of the agents that were there that day.
Absolutely,
and,
yeah.
Told the story that hasn't been told ever, some of it ever, right?
Yes, in fact, the book is Ranch Apocalypse, 51 Days in Waco, The Untold Story, and I really believe it is even the cover of the book, the picture on the front, those crosses, I mean, that's a picture that's never been published before. So it contains stories and photographs of things that people have never seen or heard about before.
All right. Tell us a story about the title.
Well, the title, Ranch Apocalypse, actually, I didn't just make that up. As I was doing my research for the book, I found out that about 2 months prior to the search warrant or the shootout, that one of the Davidian members had been in town in Waco conducting some business for the compound at a equipment rental business. And they would rent heavy equipment to dig pits and do various construction things that they were always doing out there. They had all kinds of projects going all the time. This individual had gone in, I think, to pay a bill. And while he was in there, the bill was styled, I believe, in the name Mount Carmel, which is what the name of the compound had been called. And he said, well, you need to change the name of the bill. David Koresh wants the name changed. He's decided to call it something different. And they said, what do you need to change to? And he said, Ranch Apocalypse. And bear in mind that this was during this time, we didn't know it really, but we found out later David Koresh at that time knew he was under investigation. So I think the reason why he changed the name was a foreshadowing of what he knew was about to come.
Right. Is there any doubt in your mind that this is like a fulfilling his prophecy, or did you ever think they were going to come out?
Absolutely, they were never going to come out. And I can tell you now, especially after researching and knowing what I know, I'm telling you that David Koresh, he prophesied of death by fire for the compound for years. That was what he focused on, was end-time prophecy. All the time, that's what he beat into the people. Even some of the young children that came out before the fire. After the fire occurred and their parents burned up, they weren't really shocked or surprised because in their mind, this is what's supposed to happen. This is what was going to happen. David Koresh was basically king of that empire while he lived in there. He controlled everything, and he knew once the shootout occurred that he would be facing, at the very least, a lifetime in jail, and he was never going to come out and give that up.
Right. Give us an example of something that people may surprised to read in your book?
Well, one small thing, during the siege, 2 different people at 2 different times actually snuck into the compound. And I thought that was kind of funny. They snuck by the FBI perimeter. And David Koresh took them in. And one of them for just a few days and one of them maybe for a week. He eventually kicked them back out. You know, there's some side stories in Ranch Apocalypse that I think show the human side. Like at one point there was a building down the road from the compound, and it was called the Mag Bag. It was just the term for it. And it was a metal building that the Branch Davidians had rented and they used as a workshop. And so the Mag Bag also needed to be searched along with the compound. And after the shootout the first day, the ATF agents in charge decided that to search the Mag Bag, they feared that it might have been rigged with explosives by this time. So early on Monday morning, they sent a tank to go through, and I have a picture of that, by the way, in here, and breach the Mag Bag. And it was, what happened was there was no one there. There was not rigged with explosives, but they conducted a search. But there was a long-haired golden retriever that came running out with his ears back, just scared to death. Well, there was a perimeter set up, a checkpoint set up right by there by the law enforcement. And the next few days, the poor animal was all scared, wandering around, and the agents started feeding this dog. And eventually, they adopted him, and he ended up sitting at the checkpoint with them like he was guarding it. They put a DPS trooper patch on him and a sergeant stripes. They promoted him, you know. His name was Sergeant. And after everything ended, they took him home. One of the guys took him home. He lived to be a part of their family for years. There's a lot of little human interest stories and side stories in here like that, too.
So tell us briefly, this is not your first book. Tell us briefly about
Well, I served a year in Iraq as what you call a special agent attaché, counterterrorism, mainly focusing on terrorist finance, and that was a great time. I got to do all kinds of crazy things. I went to Saddam Hussein's trial, and I ran raids with our special forces and even with the Iraqi special forces and other things too. And my first book is called Dan Baghdad, because that was the email I used when I sent home portions of things of what I was doing. I kept a journal, and I wrote a book there titled Dan Baghdad for that.
Anything else you want to share with us before we let you go?
No, I just want to say that the Branch Davidian incident is still, to this day, the longest shootout in law enforcement history, the longest siege in law enforcement history, and by far the worst tragedy in law enforcement history, given the loss of life on both sides. And people still don't really know the true story, and I would really hope that they would read this book with an open mind and actually learn what really happened, how it came about.
Because you try to go right down the middle, right? I mean,
Absolutely. Listen, I tried to be objective in this book, and in fact, a lot of the comments I've already had. The book is on Amazon, by the way, and a lot of the comments, go in and read them. A lot of the readers are saying every comment so far has been 5 stars, but they're all saying this was an objective. I found it to be fair. It wasn't one-sided. In fact, I devoted one whole chapter of the book to the mistakes that the government made, and there were many of them. One of them especially, not just the decision to go in, that was probably the biggest one once they had been compromised, but another fairly large mistake was the way that the FBI handled the siege situation. On one hand, they're telling, the negotiators are telling David Koresh and Steve Schneider inside, hey, I'm your buddy, I'm your pal, I'm your friend, come on, baby, come out, I want to help you. And at the other hand, they're out with tanks smashing their cars, running over their prized vehicles. They're blaring annoying music and sounds into the compound day and night. They're cutting off the electricity on nights when it's cold, using floodlights in their windows at night. And then in their press conferences, they're saying David Koresh is a thug, he's a child molester, and things like that. So they had conflicting tactics, and that was another big mistake during the seizure that was made.
Okay.
So
Tell folks how to get your book.
Just go to Amazon and Amazon Books and either search Ranch Apocalypse or my name, Dan Morris, and you can find it. And read the reviews and see what you want to do if you want to buy it.